The world watched in astonishment as the news broke. On June 15, 2025, Canada took the unprecedented step of closing its border to all U.S. vehicle traffic, a move that sent shockwaves across the continent. This included the critical Alaska Highway, the only land route connecting the lower 48 states to the last frontier, Alaska. The closure of this vital artery was a significant blow to both nations. No more trucks laden with goods could cross the border, halting the flow of essential supplies and disrupting trade routes that had been established for decades. No more family road trips could be taken, leaving many vacation plans in disarray, and families stranded on either side of the border. The artery between Alaska and the continental U.S. had been severed, creating a sense of isolation for those in the northernmost state. The reasons for this drastic action were complex and multifaceted. Officially, Canada cited concerns over the spread of a new variant of a highly contagious virus originating in the United States, a virus that had already caused significant health crises. However, many suspected a more calculated motive behind the closure. Speculation ran rampant as analysts and citizens alike questioned the true intentions of the Canadian government. Tensions had been simmering between the two North American neighbors for years, fueled by trade disputes, political clashes, and differing policies on various international issues. This closure, some argued, was a power play by Canada, a strategic move to assert its independence and force concessions from a seemingly unpredictable American administration. It was a bold statement on the global stage. The closure sent shockwaves through both nations, affecting millions of lives. For Americans, it was a stark reminder of their reliance on their northern neighbor, particularly when it came to the resource-rich state of Alaska. The disruption in supply chains led to empty shelves and rising concerns. For Canadians, it was a bold move, a gamble that could either force the U.S. to the negotiating table or ignite a full-blown diplomatic crisis. The nation was divided on the issue, with strong opinions on both sides. The world held its breath, waiting to see how the U.S. would respond to this unprecedented action. Few could have predicted the firestorm that was about to erupt, as the international community braced for the fallout from Canada's bold move. The news hit Donald Trump like a sucker punch, and as always, his weapon of choice was Twitter. "Canada playing games? Weak! They need us more than we need them," one tweet raged. Another, just minutes later, threatened tariffs on Canadian maple syrup, calling it overrated and sticky. The tirade continued for hours, each tweet more unhinged than the last. Gone was any pretense of diplomacy. Trump, never one to back down from a fight, seemed personally affronted by Canada's audacity. He railed against Prime Minister Trudeau, calling him Little Justin and accusing him of trying to steal American jobs and resources. The president's outburst drew immediate condemnation from world leaders, many of whom expressed concern over his volatile behavior. Even some of Trump's most ardent supporters seemed taken aback by the sheer vitriol of his response. The situation was escalating rapidly, and the world braced itself for a diplomatic showdown of epic proportions. The Alaska Highway, a ribbon of asphalt carving through rugged terrain, is more than just a road. For Alaskans, it's a lifeline, a vital artery for the transportation of essential goods, from food and fuel to medicine and building materials. Its significance cannot be overstated. This highway is the backbone of daily life in Alaska, connecting remote communities and ensuring that the necessities of life reach even the most isolated areas. When the highway is open and functioning, it supports the flow of goods and services seamlessly. However, its closure had immediate and far-reaching consequences. The sudden halt in transportation disrupted the delicate balance of supply and demand. Supermarket shelves in Anchorage and Fairbanks began to empty as supplies dwindled. People found themselves facing shortages of everyday items, creating a sense of panic and uncertainty. Gas stations started rationing fuel, leading to long lines and rising tensions. The scarcity of fuel not only affected personal transportation, but also had a ripple effect on businesses and services. Construction projects stalled, and businesses struggled to cope with the disruption to their supply chains. The economic impact was staggering, with losses mounting daily. Alaska, heavily reliant on tourism and resource extraction, faced the prospect of a devastating recession. The state's economy, already fragile, was pushed to the brink. The tourism industry, a major source of revenue, saw a sharp decline in visitors. Resource extraction industries, which depend on the highway for transporting materials, also suffered significant setbacks. The state's elected officials pleaded with the federal government to take action, But with each passing day, the situation grew more dire. The urgency of the crisis was palpable. The closure of the Alaska Highway exposed the vulnerability of America's largest state, highlighting its dependence on a single route and raising serious questions about national security. The isolation of Alaska, combined with its strategic importance, made the situation even more critical. The highway's closure was not just an inconvenience, it was a potential threat to national security. It was a stark reminder that even in the 21st century, geography could still hold a nation hostage. The challenges faced by Alaska underscored the need for resilient infrastructure and strategic planning to ensure the state's stability and security. Section 4: Ripples of Retaliation, Economic and Political Fallout. Trump, true to his word, wasn't letting Canada's aggression stand. Retaliatory tariffs on Canadian lumber hit the construction industry hard, while levies on imported vehicles sent ripples through the auto sector. This trade war, however, was a double-edged sword, hurting American businesses and consumers just as much as their intended targets. The political fallout was even more significant. The border closure became a rallying cry for Trump's base, further fueling the flames of nationalism and isolationism. Anti-Canadian sentiment, once relegated to the fringes, began to seep into the mainstream media, with some commentators even questioning the value of the U.S. Canada alliance. The situation was a diplomatic nightmare. Traditional allies, bound by decades of cooperation and shared values, were now locked in a bitter standoff, with no end in sight. The world watched in disbelief, wondering how two of the most powerful nations on Earth could be brought to the brink by a single road. Section 5: North of the Divide, Canada's Perspective. Inside Canada, the mood was a mix of apprehension and defiance. Citizens were glued to their screens, anxiously following the latest developments. Polls showed a majority of Canadians supported their government's decision to close the border, citing public health concerns and a desire to send a message to the U.S. The sentiment was clear: safety first. Prime Minister Trudeau, once known for his measured approach, remained resolute. His tone was firm, his resolve unshaken. He insisted that Canada's actions were not intended to be hostile, but rather a necessary step to protect its citizens. Trudeau emphasized that the health and safety of Canadians were paramount. He called on the U.S. to address the underlying issues driving the conflict, from trade disputes to climate change, urging a return to dialogue and cooperation. Trudeau's message was clear: collaboration over confrontation. However, beneath the surface of unity, cracks were beginning to show. Conversations in coffee shops and debates in public forums revealed a nation grappling with internal divisions. Some Canadians, particularly those living in border communities heavily reliant on trade and tourism, felt the economic pinch of the standoff. The once bustling border towns now faced an uncertain future. Others worried about the long-term consequences of alienating their powerful southern neighbor. The economic ramifications were a growing concern. The situation was a delicate balancing act for Canada. The government had to weigh the immediate benefits of their actions against potential long-term fallout. It had taken a bold stand, asserting its sovereignty and sending a clear message to the world that it would not be bullied. The nation's pride was evident in the streets, with protests supporting the government's stance. But the question remained: at what cost? Experts debated the potential repercussions, and the nation watched, waiting to see how the story would unfold.